You might be in a spot where you are beginning to recognize the signs of burnout, where you're done. You're done with church, you're done with people, you're done with family, you're done with being constantly concerned about everybody and managing everything and making sure that nothing falls through the cracks besides you, because you're falling through the cracks and you're sick of it. And recognizing burnout is the easy part. The tricky part is the next step, which would be that you actually have to now own your part. The problem is that burnout tends to leave us, or everything that leads to burnout tends to all happen in a way that makes you feel like life is happening to you and you actually have no control, no choice, and you're totally powerless to change it. But the truth is that everything that has led up to the point of you being done with life and everything that comes along with it is actually, it's happened because you've said yes a whole bunch of little times. And you might be really annoyed at me for even saying that, because I know for me, I was told to convince that I'm not saying yes to any of this. This is all happening to me. And I just wish that everybody around me would finally figure it out and stop putting all this pressure and all these expectations on me. But I was the one saying yes. Just like for you, everything in your life, you're saying yes to. And it's really hard to own, but I hope you stick with me, because if you can figure out how to take this next step, and if you can own your part to play, we're not like, yes, there's a whole bunch of other factors and other people have had their fingers in your life for a long time too. But if you can own your part and begin to change that, you're going to see immediate and quick, some long-term, but some very quick results that pay off very fast. So before we jump into that though, I want to invite you to grab the burnout diagnostic in the description below if you're ready to really get a handhold on what's going on in your life and why you're so done, and why just that there's that tension, especially for Christian women, where we don't want to quit on people, we don't want to quit on God, we don't want to quit on life, and yet we're so done. So if that's you, then grab that burnout diagnostic in the description below. Okay, so if you've ever worked with someone who spends more money than they have, and if they don't yet know how to own their choices. So like, let's say they're spending too much money and they're feeling the pinch, they're feeling the frustration of never having enough. Then when you sit down with them, if they do not yet know how to own their choices, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is so often, well, I have to buy milk. I have to buy toilet paper. To which I would say, absolutely. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about needing to buy groceries or pay your mortgage or pay your bills. We're talking about those random Amazon purchases that you keep making at 10 p.m. That's the part that we want to own. But when someone overspends their money and doesn't know how to own their choices, they're going to look at the things that they absolutely have to do and make it seem like you're the crazy one for thinking that they have any kind of wiggle room. So the same thing happens with our choices, that when we are burnt out, it's usually because we are spending ourselves, who we are, our own capacity, we're spending our resources, but we're overspending it. And if we're burnt out, burnout comes with a certain mentality, and that mentality usually means that we don't have, we manage life, or we do life in a way where we are saying yes and yes and yes to every little thing, and we don't realize that we can actually make choices. So then when you start to manage your own choices and look at it differently, the resistance inside of you, me, anyone who struggles with this mentality is typically going to be, well, like, my kid's car broke down last week. Of course I had to help them. To which, again, of course you have to help them. We're not talking about the literal actual emergencies where someone needs help. We're talking about all the other times. We're talking about the mentality that has you on 24/7, where you're constantly engaging, you're constantly worried about the next thing that comes up. You're saying yes before you've even listened to the request. You're worried about, you spend 3 whole days worrying about how someone is going to perceive a certain choice that you really want to make, but then you're not making it because you're worried about what they're going to think. So it's this mentality of always being on, always engaging, always it is exhausting. And just when you are constantly mentally doing gymnastics, trying to manage every little thing in life, you are going to burn yourself out. Like that, it's a guarantee. You are going to burn yourself out, and you're going to feel totally powerless along the way, and be left. You'll be left thinking that it was like other people, if other people had changed something, or if they expected less of you than you, this wouldn't have happened. And it's a really, like, there's no win. There's no wiggle room. There's nothing you can do if you're powerless. But if the choices are yours, where you were the one who said yes to these things, you were the one that said yes before you even listened to the question. And even if you listen to the question, you might have had the thought of, I know I don't have time for this, but you don't know how to say no. So you said yes. That was your choice. And if you can learn to own that, where it's not a crisis, it's not an emergency, but you just have this default of saying yes all the time, you'll begin to see where you're overspending yourself, where you're overextending yourself, you're overfunctioning. And then if you can learn to manage those moments, if you can learn to manage the thoughts going through your head and the constant worrying about other people, the constant like saying yes to things because no one else is going to say yes to it. And it's like, instead of just letting those things fall, you're always picking them up. You're always carrying all this stuff. If you can learn to stop doing a handful of those things, you're going to feel a whole lot of relief in life, a whole lot more joy, it's just like the bubble finally gets popped, and all of a sudden there's just relief, which I'm guessing you're really wanting. So again, if you are ready to take this to the next level, then grab the burnout diagnostic in the description below to really nail down just how bad it is and next steps from there. Okay, so I also want to give the example of, like, it's one thing to start to recognize just that feeling of that sentiment of, I'm so done. I'm done with people. I'm done with church. I'm done with just like everything that comes along with being a Christian. I'm done with which is really hard, right? Because you're like, but I don't want to be done. So why do I feel so done? And why am I so frustrated all the time? And then it's another thing to start to say, okay, you know what? I am beginning to recognize, yep, I had a part to play in all the stuff that I said yes to. But then the next thing, which is also tricky, but again, give yourself some time to awkwardly move through this because the payoff is huge. But the next thing is then figuring out, how do you actually make a choice with your life? How do you prioritize or give room for those most important things and begin to remove the other things that are constantly just depleting you and burning you out? So my garden last year and this year taught me a really big life lesson, and it taught me something really important about myself that is probably also true for you. And that is that it taught me that if I want things to work, I need to be decisive. So last year in my garden, or I guess over the last few years, there are some plants that I have to plant and grow and intentionally put into the garden. And then we also have a handful of plants that come up on their own. So we've got like some wild sunflowers. We've got a bunch of these like cute little wild vines. And then we have 2 different kinds of wild spinach that comes up, which is so nice when you have like just more than enough spinach and just like organically grown. It tastes amazing. And it's just one of those things that I love having in the garden. But the problem is, so those come up every year. And last year I realized that I wanted, like, let's say, so I'm planting tomatoes and zucchini. But around the tomatoes and zucchini, there's this wild spinach that is coming up. So it's coming up all over the place. So there's lots where it's told it's coming up where I want it to come up, and then it's coming up where I don't want it to come up. And last year, I was like, oh, but it's such a waste. Like if I pick it, it's 2 inches away from my tomato plant, but I can't pick it because if I pick it, that's a waste. So because I didn't know how to make that choice to have a spot like this is only for tomato plants and this spot is only for wild spinach. I didn't know how to actually choose that and act on that. So I let it grow wherever it wanted to grow. And everything in the garden struggled. Nothing, like it all grew, the weeds or this plant, because it's a plant where when I want it to be a plant, and then wherever it's growing where it's not supposed to be, and it's a weed. So the weeds around my tomatoes and zucchinis grew amazing. The tomato plants, not so much, because I couldn't be decisive and say, well, it's growing in the wrong spot, I'm going to pick it. So let's say like out of 100 plants, I've got 85 that are growing where I want it to be and 15 that are growing in the wrong spot. But I couldn't pick it because it felt like a waste. So I just let it do its own thing. But the thing is that if you want your life to function well, if you have a garden, so talking about our life being a garden, if you want like a garden flourishes because a gardener, yes, they plant what they want to be there, but it flourishes because they remove everything that's not supposed to be wherever it's not supposed to be. And that's where or why a garden flourishes, because the gardener is very intentional with what is growing where, instead of just putting a whole bunch of stuff out there and hoping that it sorts itself out. So if you're burnt out, if there's too much, if you're overspending yourself, it's likely because you've got all these different things in life. Maybe something's amazing, something's good enough, and something's bad that you don't want to be there, but you don't know how to be decisive. And so if this is you, it's going to, you will learn how to be decisive, and it'll become easy over time. But at first, it just takes us recognizing that it's really hard, right? Because sometimes you want to just be able to leave things alone, let them do their thing, and hope it all turns out, but it typically doesn't. And then everything in your life begins to struggle because there's this overcrowding and stuff just is not working. And even if everything in your schedule looks like it's working, you yourself might be overcrowded and you don't have energy. And there's something that starts to struggle. Like the things especially in my garden, I wanted the tomato plants to flourish. Those are the ones we really want to eat from. And so you might have things in your life where you've intentionally put them in there, you want them to grow, but there's all these other things around them that are weighing it down. So, where you're struggling to engage with your kids or your husband well, or you're struggling to do your main role at church or in the kingdom of God. Again, for Christian women, this is so hard because we've learned to not say no. We've learned to just let what happens happen. And then we're constantly trying to figure out our own attitudes and perspectives and saying, if I was more patient, if I was more kind, if I was not bothered so easily, when maybe you need to let yourself be a little bit more bothered, not less bothered. Because if you were more bothered, you would actually say, okay, enough's enough. This is not working. Whatever I'm doing is not working. I'm going to own my part. I'm going to start to change it. I'm going to take this seriously. And again, if you want help with this, grab the burnout diagnostic in the description below this video. But at some point, you've got to let yourself say enough's enough. I'm fed up. Something has to change. And to begin to decide, what do you want in your life? And what are those weeds so with my garden last year, after realizing that I'm not going to get what I want if I can't figure out how to just pull this plant that is it's growing in the wrong spot. I have to pull this wild spinach that I want to let it grow, but I've got to pull it if I want the tomato plant to flourish. And I've got to do that in life, where if I want to do my YouTube channel well, there are things that I can't just let whatever come into my schedule. I have to be very picky. If we want to have a healthy family life, whatever it is that you're wanting to give time to, even if it's time to just sit in peace with a cup of coffee, you have to be decisive of, I'm putting this here. And whenever these other things come up that starts to throw these very specific things that I'm adding into my life, when these random things start to crowd in, I'm going to pick it. I'm going to remove it. And it's hard at first. It becomes easy. And you got to just find something in your life that you got to, I think, right now, I think just even realizing that I had to realize with my garden, I had to realize this in my life, that I'm really bad at this. I don't know how to be decisive. I wish that other people would just recognize that I need space and they would just give me space. Probably not going to happen. So you need to decide, learn to recognize it and learn to pull up those weeds, learn to create a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of buffer room, learn to bring the choices that you've believed were that other people are making these choices for you and you have no control. Learn just to little by little bring them back into your control. Try saying no when you typically would always say yes. Try if someone, again, back to that thing where if you say yes before you've even listened to the question, just practice pausing. Like just say, let me think about that. Even that can be enough just to break the cycle of this habit, because it's so habit. We're so prone to just thinking it's a godly thing, it's the Christian thing, it's the motherly thing, it's the friendly thing to do, to always be helpful. But being helpful is the fastest road to burnout. Being kind, being the go-to person, the yes person, that's the fastest road to burnout. And you are going to hate your life and end up hating other people if you keep on saying yes to it. So if you want to change this, like, there is a way to be kind, to help people, to show up for them without burning yourself out, and where you can actually help people in a way that gives them life and gives you life. But you can't keep on saying yes to everything. So you got to choose. You keep on saying yes, you're going to burn out. It's 2 + 2 = 4. That's just how it works. Or you begin to change things, take this seriously, and add some different numbers into the equation so that you can start getting some different results. All right, that is all. So remember to grab that burnout diagnostic in the description below. And lastly, read your Bible, get lost in the story of God, and play your part, because you were made for something more.